Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Optimizing Mother podcast. I am so excited to be here today with a Shlucha who has a lot of accomplishments, school, and who's a world-renowned speaker, articulate, but most importantly is inspiring in her personal life, and that is Mrs. Goldie Plotkin from Ontario. Did I get that right?
Markham, Ontario. Yeah.
Markham, Ontario. Hi, Mrs. Plotkin. Welcome.
Morning. Nice to see you.
So this is the Optimizing Mother podcast, and we're here to support and inspire mothers no matter what their stage they're in. We're all on a journey with the precious neshamas that Hashem gave us. And that's why specifically from all the topics, I wanted Mrs. Plotkin to share with us a little bit about her mothering journey and how she learned and grew from her challenges so that we can each internalize into our lives. When we have our day-to-day struggles and challenges, we're not alone. There are more experienced mothers among us who went through this and who have their hard-earned wisdom to share. Now, Mrs. Plotkin, Baruch Hashem, has a big and beautiful family, but I wanted to know if you could share with us a little bit today about one of your special children, about your Zalmy.
My favorite topic. So which angle would you like to know? When he was born, as a child? Which angle, Sarah, would you like?
I think let's start right into the story. Okay. What happened when you found out you gave birth to a child with special needs, with Down syndrome? Like, take us back there.
Okay. So actually it was a very interesting, for those of you who've heard of COVID, Toronto 19 years ago had a similar disease going on. It was called SARS. So the city was in lockdown, actually. People weren't coming, people were wearing masks. And it was during that time in the spring that I gave birth to my son. Now, so imagine you walking into a hospital, which usually has lights and action. It's a very dark, dismal hospital at that point. I go in, they whisk me in, and suddenly I'm giving birth without any epidural. There was just no prediction that this was happening so quickly. And as he came out, mothers are intuitive. I realized that this child was different. And when the doctors quickly called his backup, and a bunch of doctors and nurses came in, and they looked at him from every angle, and they gave me the strong news and dropped him on my chest with the words, "Your child has trisomy 21, and literally left the room. All of them scurried out and left me and my husband with this package, a beautiful baby, with the news just looming on top of him, trisomy 21. Now, I knew what trisomy 21 is. It's a Down syndrome child. And at that point, for any mothers listening, if you've ever had to go through this, it's so life transforming because you're like in this zone. You don't even know, scream, cry, laugh, silence. And I remember my husband and I, he was behind the curtain. He comes in and we just looked at each other and we just said, we are Shlucha of the Rebbe for the last about 17 years at that point. And we have been giving classes and shiurim, your typical shliach, concepts of betacha and emuna, chakut v'tzayngut, hakol b'dei shemayim, and a kadosh baruch hu b'ratuni b'yosef, all the beautiful, Maimorich Chal, all the teachings. So we looked at each other, we said, everything we taught till now we have to live it. And that was totally the pivoting moment in our whole new parenting. It wasn't just in theory, it was practice. And then my husband had to go and let the children know that their mommy had a baby and it was a boy. And it was a very exciting time because right then we had 4 and 3. And this baby was going to determine whether it was going to be equal boys and girls. Was it going to be more boys? So all the kids are waiting at home to hear the news. So Sunday morning, my husband goes running in and he sits down with the children in the family room. And first of all, he says, it's a boy. And all my little boys started making somersaults and all kinds of, headstands. It was very exciting for them. It's going to be more of the males were going to be dominant in our home. But then my husband had to reveal to them that it was going to be a special child. And Baruch Hashem, say that the Eibishter gives you the words, right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu speaks through your mouth. And he said to the children, and not only do you have a boy, but our family is very, very lucky. We have been very benched. We have been given a special neshama. And the kids, and I had older girls then, and they're like, what does that exactly mean? So my husband said, our baby has a special neshama. And that's why when special neshamas, and this is according to actually Chazal and Kabbalah tell us, that when a special neshama comes down, it actually enters through a broken body, because the physical body cannot contain the Kedusha and the holiness. And as a result, there are disabilities associated with this neshama. And the kids wanted to know what it was going to look like. And now, sorry, you might know, but I have a special needs sister. She's very popular in Brooklyn, in Crown Heights.
Yeah.
So my children were aware what Down syndrome was. And, for some of them, it was like, oh, no. For some of them, it was, oh, we know this. So they're all different reactions. But it was a trying time. And my husband did really, he was amazing the way he communicated with the children, spent a couple of hours. In fact, one of my sons, who was 5 at the time, maybe 6, he's a shliach today, he went to school that morning, super excited, tell his friends that my mom had a baby, but this one has a special neshama, not like every baby. And I remember that mother calling me weeks later saying, I don't know, Goldie, what you told your kids, but my sons want to have a special neshama like your family now.
Wow.
So it did translate.
Mrs. Plotkin, first of all, thank you for sharing that and a little bit of your process. And the reason I really wanted you to share is the truth is everybody has different challenges with their children. There's a full range. Some are obvious, like special needs. Some are quote unquote hidden special needs. Every child has their challenges, their needs. And I would love if you could share a little bit more of what you were saying about that was the moment where you had to practice the bitachon. Like, what did you do? I could imagine, you shared a little bit, the emotions, it was hard, it was dark. What does that look like for a mother to internalize the positivity in all that's going on? Because, I've seen your Facebook posts and I've heard from your family. You guys celebrated and cherished Zalmy, and it was positivity and it was laughter. So clearly you did a process in your mind. And I would love if you could share a little bit, like, what does that look like to really internalize this is from Hashem and this is the child that I got, and I will celebrate him for the way that he is and look at his neshama and the mind shifts. How did you do that?
So one of the most important factors I feel that we have as Chassidim is that we are really immersed in our Rebbe's teachings, specifically, our Rebbe, who I grew up, I was a teenager, I was a young adult attending Farbrengens. I was very immersed in the Rebbe's outlook, the Rebbe's hashkafas, just the Rebbe's whole essence. And, it seeps in. So when you immerse yourself in whatever it is, if you immerse yourself in certain music, if you immerse yourself in a certain guidelines or teachings or theories, it eventually rubs off on you, and you become that direction, that theory. I think when we grow up with Chassidus and we learn the Rebbe's teachings and we watch Farbrengens and we see the Rebbe's reactions or connections to people, whether it's through dollars or whether it was at Farbrengens, you don't even realize, but actually there's a paradigm shift going on in your mind and you start thinking like the Rebbe.
It almost prepares you for life.
It does. It's like, you take you give your children the vitamins because so that one day when they do have a cold, their immune system is strong. You don't say, oh no, look at my child, they're falling apart, I better start pumping them with vitamins. By then it might be late. So we preempt it by immersing ourselves with shiurim, with learning, with Farbrengens, and we think to ourselves, oh, well, that's a very nice thought, or that's a very nice idea. It's not. The more we immerse, the more we it's like, I always give the example when I speak to the high schoolers, how do you make a pickle? You take a cucumber and you throw it into a jar with garlic and pepper and dill and basil and salt. You leave it there for a few weeks and you pull it out and there's the pickle. And you can never unpickle a pickle. Once a pickle's become a pickle, it can't become a cucumber again. It has now become officially a pickle forever until it's consumed, right? I feel like when we immerse ourselves in this atmosphere of the garlic, the dill, the basil of Chassidus, we become that pickle, whether we like it or not.
We get marinated and we marinate our kids in. Yeah. But can you give examples of specific things that you've learned that like directly helped you with the challenge you were going through as a mother?
Well, there were a few. first of all, Trach gut wird sein gut has been my motto. I once gave a class to the women in my community. It was actually a 6-week lecture. And one of the women brought me in a book called The Secret. I don't know if you ever heard of the book. I don't even know who the author is, not a Jewish woman. But her whole philosophy was like attracts like. What you give out to the universe is what you get back. And the woman who brought in the book, she says to me, Goldie, you could have written the book and you would have been the millionaire today. Because this is really who we are as shluchas. This is who we are as chassidim. When you think positive, and the Rebbe talks about this all the time. When you think positive, this is what becomes your reality. And I'll just give you a little bit a family background. One of my uncles, Mendel Shem Tov, Olav Shalom, this is my father's brother, older brother. When he was, I believe, 19 years old, he was suffering from a medical condition. And he wrote a letter to the Rebbe, and he wrote, I actually have the letter, and he wrote to the Rebbe, I have this terrible condition. I think it was ulcers, and it's painful and it's suffering, and I don't know what to think. And the Rebbe responded, you don't know what to think? We learn and we learn about Emunah B'tachon, and then when we need it, where is that Emunah B'tachon? The Rebbe says, go back to learning from the Chayvus of Avavas, the book called Shar B'tachon, and learn it 3 or 4 times. Why? Because when you learn these concepts again and again and again, they become the de facto way you think.
So I'm going to share with you a practical story that happened one morning. You know, being the mother of Kanina, her 8 children, mornings are hectic. No one's surprised about that. And it was one morning I was getting all the kids ready with their homework or their lunches. And it was very quiet upstairs in Zalmy's room. I didn't know why he wasn't coming down to join us for breakfast. And when I walk upstairs, I get into his room and suddenly I just saw stars. I mean, the entire room had been just totally wrecked up. Everything, whatever he could get his hands on, it was everywhere. Things were thrown, sprawled all over the floor, total chaos there. And here I am trying to get ready my kids, getting myself off to my preschool, getting Zalmy ready. And I just started seeing stars. And I really didn't know how I was going to deal with this. And I was just ready to just like, you know, your normal reaction would be to like maybe let out a shout, explode, storm out of the room. I took a deep breath. I found a spot there on the mattress that hadn't been like sort of ruined. And I just sat down and I said, God, just thank you. Thank you that this mess I can help clean up. I can handle my son. I can handle the mess. I'm strong enough to deal with this. And thank God that no one has to take care of me and no one has to help me physically. I can be astute and strong enough to take care of my son. And it was just an aha moment because normally I would have pitied myself, poor me, woe is to me, look at my life, look what I have to deal with. You know, how come it happened to me? But I didn't resort to that way of thinking. I had just focused on, I'm strong enough, I'm quick enough, I'm healthy enough to clean this up, to get this going, to deal with Zalmy. And that really just allowed me to think about just viewing life through the positive lens. And everything that I've been learning all my life, it sort of came into fruition at that moment just by allowing myself to align myself with that way, with that Trach gut wird sein gut way.
This incident just stayed with me that, first of all, like I was so thrilled that I guess my Nefesh Elokis was really strong at that moment and it overpowered the Nefesh Bahamas. We're like, oh, woe is to me, poor me. These are experiences the Eibishter gives us, and every day, every minute, every second, we choose which path. Is it the Nefesh Elokis path, Nefesh Bahamas path? It also helps that I teach Tanya to the women in my community. So Tanya really, really, really resonates with me. It's really become part of my life. And I really have to give a shout out to my father. My father, for those in Crown Heights who know him, Yisrael Shem Tov, he's an icon there. But many people don't know him as a father. And as a father, He's very, very, very involved with his children's lives, even when they're married and even when they have their own grandchildren. I remember having conversations with my father, listen, way before this incident. Todd, it's hard for me. Baruch Hashem, I have 7 children. I have a community. I have a school. I have programs. I can't believe they wish to do this. Why would they wish to do this? The constant struggle. We all have that. The Yetzer Hara, Yetzer Tov thing always. And we together began learning Tanya alone, not me as a teacher, but me as a student. And specifically, Perek Chavav, we spoke a lot about Atzvos versus Merirus. That helped me a lot. It helped me a lot in my living with my reality, my situation, giving it over to my children. And I just say that, the Ashrei Matov Chalkeinu is not just a song. It's not just a banner. It's my life. Thank you, Hashem. I'm a chassid. Thank you, Hashem. I'm a Chabad chassid. Thank you, Hashem, that I'm able to teach Chassidus.
Wow. I find myself speechless. Doesn't happen too often. I'm taking it in. I'm really I think what I'm thinking about is that you found an area of the bed that was clean. That was the part that stood out for me. You walk into a situation that's chaotic, that's not working, that's not managing, that's overwhelming. And you start by finding the area that's clean, like the bright spot. That's,
I like that. Sarah, I love that.
I don't know if you meant it, but that's what I was talking about. I'm there's going to be there's going to be a lot going on, but that one thing that the kid is doing right, the bright spot. And from there, you could build up on it. That's incredible. Wow. And it's also so interesting that your father learned with you. In other words, at the same time that we're mashpia to our children, we also are in the position of makabel. I love the multi-generational thing that you're learning and you're teaching. It's incredible. And I'd love to hear other examples of how your children, led by your example, how did they interact with Zalmy? How did your other boys, how did your girls, what was it like? And can you share anything specific of how it maybe even brought out a positive, side to them, etc.?
So I do have to say, I feel like my children are very, very, very special. My girls, my boys, they're very unusual. And I think anyone who has a special needs sibling, they are like that. And anyone who listens now, they'll go, yeah, I know. My sons were head counselors in Gan Yisrael, New York, and each one of them had a camper that had a difficulty. And my kids were we're not challenged by that at all. They embraced those children. There are a lot of stories. One story that stands out is my Shalom Bear, who was 2 years old when Zalmy was born. So he grew up with a sibling, never realized his brother was different. I think he said to me, we actually asked him the other day, Shalom Bear, when did you realize Zalmy was special needs? He goes, I think once my friends came over to play and one of my kids said, Shalom Bear, why is your brother so funny? He doesn't even talk yet. He doesn't even walk normal. And Shalom Bear came running over to me saying, Mommy, is that true? It was just so part of our family dynamics. He never even picked it up. But this Shalom Bear, just a tzaddik. I talk about him, I get emotional. It's really incredible how children, like you said, Sarah, when they follow their parents, who follow their rabbeim, they pick up through osmosis. You can't teach sensitivity. You can't teach joy in life. You can't teach betachan. You have to live it. It's not talking the talk. It's walking the walk. And one real strong, there are many, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of examples of how my family lived with Zalmy. It was my Shalom Bear's 8th grade graduation. And all the boys were sitting there. It's 20 boys sitting on the stage. And each one gave a speech. And about 4 or 5 kids made a speech. Shalom Bear had just finished his speech. Don't remember anything that he spoke about. But I was sitting there with Zalmy. And I did not want to bring Zalmy. And Shalom Bear goes, Ma, bring Zalmy. I want him to be there. I'm so proud of him. So very uncomfortably, why am I saying uncomfortable? Because I knew that he was going to do something. So I was always on the alert. If something happens, I'll run out. Zalmy bolts from my seat and he runs up on the stage. Now, Zalmy, as I mentioned, is a big boy and he was bigger than his brother. And he sat down on Shalom Bear's lap. And
in front of everyone.
The whole crowd, about 200 people watching, the whole class is there. The principal is there. And Zalmy just walks up. Now, Zalmy's class, Shalom Bear's class knows Zalmy. They've come to my home. They knew Zalmy. But Zalmy sits down And instinctively, Shalom just wrapped his hands around Zalmi's big, delicious tummy. And I quickly went up to take Zalmi down. And Shalom gives me a look like, Mommy, it's okay. Don't worry, don't worry. And for the rest of the graduation, this big Down syndrome child is sitting on Shalom Bear, who you don't see anymore. So he's literally oblivious. You don't see him anymore. He's blacked out. But Zalmi sat through the graduation. I felt bad because nobody listened to speeches. They were just zooming in on a few things. How this Shalom Bear, at 13, we were very, very sensitive to being different, to being poked fun at, or to being excluded. He was proud to have his Down syndrome brother sitting on his lap. The way Zalmi had this way of caressing, he loved to caress people's faces. The way he was caressing Shalom Bear's face. I mean, the principal came over to me afterwards and I apologized. And he goes, you don't understand, Mrs. Plotkin. Today's graduation will never, ever be forgotten in the entire Cheder Chabad experience, because there was a message that came through that no speeches were able to give over. The way acceptance and the way the other kids in the class looked so lovingly at Zalmi. There were no funny faces or no like weird looks. Nobody felt uncomfortable. It was just so seamless and loving. And that you can't teach that. Sarah, you cannot teach that. It's from action. And that was like a star moment of where Shalom Bear shined through, and I was the proudest mother I could ever be.
Wow, that's amazing. That's so beautiful. What about your community? How did they interact with Zalmi, or people that knew him, or, what was it like for other people?
So really, I feel that the people in the community really watched us deal with Zalmi. Zalmi would come to shul every week with us, and I had a babysitter. And after davening, he stood up in front of the shul and said, Kapitel Chaf, Lam Ratzeach Bahart. He was very limited in his speech, but what he was interested in, he knew. He knew the Lam Ratzeach Kapitel Chaf by heart, and the whole shul would repeat after him. And everybody responded. When Zalmi was nifter 4.5 years ago, it was a terrible loss for the community in so many ways. They lost the role modeling, they lost his joy, they lost his loving, they lost his acceptance. But more than that, they learned, again, by watching. They learned of accepting your challenges by reacting with positivity, and that's how your life will go. I think my community gained a lot from him. We have a little Down syndrome boy now that comes to shul who sits in the chair next to my husband, exactly where Zalmi used to sit, walks into shul with his talis, a little boy, Corey. And our shul's very accepting in every way of challenges. And they know this is the way you live as a chassid, this is the way you live as a Jew.
And what would you say to someone who reached out to you, in everything, whether it was a disappointment, a job offer that came through? In other words, there's challenges when it comes to children, and there's challenges when it comes to life. What's your first reaction? Like something that I wanted really, 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 it's just taken away. The rug was pulled out from under my feet. How would you respond to that?
I really would say, I would tell them all to immerse themselves in the Torah, in the Yiddishkeit, in their chassidus. And most of these people actually do go through challenges, turn to me first, because they know that I have that connection. I remember watching a clip where somebody walked by the Rebbe and asked the Rebbe how they have to deal with a certain situation. And the Rebbe said to them, start with yourself. And it was very, very interesting, because this person turned with almost like they wanted the Rebbe to give them a miracle cure. But instead the Rebbe said, there are no shortcuts. We have to work on ourselves. It's the way we deal with things. And there are times, Sarah, I'm not going to say that it was always Trak V'Zayin good and old B'tachan was always. I remember one morning when Zalmi was actually in the hospital. So I was in the hospital with him every day from 9 to 4. I would leave home after the kids went to school, and I would come right back as soon as the kids were coming home. So I was coming through, picking up one of the kids from Carpel. I was coming through the driveway, which actually I'm looking at right now. And My husband unrolls his window and I roll my window. And he says, "Oh, Goldie, what's happening with the Lav Malka this week?" I guess we had prepared a Lav Malka. We prepare our programs in June, and this baby showed up in April. It wasn't planned to be a Down syndrome. I remember saying to him, "I think the Lav Malka, tell Hashem to figure out his Lav Malka." So at the same time, Sarah, I really have to come across to the mothers that are listening. I'm not an angel walking around with two wings and on a level in any way of our avos or himayos or rachel, none of those. I'm a very typical down-to-earth lady like all of us. But I am fortunate that I was raised in a home that was steeped in chassidus. My father was raised in Siberia with his Zayda, my Zayda Ben Sion, who the hardships and the struggles they went through are legendary. These are stories I grew up with. These stories, I believe, really shaped who I am today. These are the stories that shaped my children, which I hope are shaping my grandchildren. You know, it's the legacy we have from all of those that came before us. But the reality is that we are human, and the Yetzer Hara and the Nefesh Bahamas get the better of us throughout the day, struggling and striving. So it's about, staying connected. I'll share with you a very funny story. I don't know how much more time we have. It's a very funny story. When we came here on Shluchas to Markham, we didn't have a shul, we didn't have a mikvah, we had nothing. So on Erev Shabbos, my husband always went to the Chabad shul in Toronto, and he would use their mikvah. He tells me on Friday, he was sitting there in the mikvah, and there was a Litvish guy, that Punkt was in the mikvah at the same time. And he was asking my husband, "Where are you from?" And they were having men's conversation. And the guy says to my husband, "So where do you live?" My husband goes, "We started a Chabad house in Markham." He goes, "Markham? There's no religious Jews in Markham." My husband goes, "Exactly. That's why I'm there. Here, where everyone lives, everyone's Jewish. And, I live in a place where he goes, "Oh, well," he says, you really are challenging yourself and your family because you could become secular very, very quick in such a place when you don't have connections from communities." So, and then he goes, "See, look at the mikvah." He goes, "When we came in here, it was hot, right? Look how cool it became." So my husband says, "That's true if you're in a place where you're not connected to the source. Where I am, I'm connected to the Rebbe. And at that moment, you know how it goes in a mikvah or a pool? Every few minutes, hot water surges in. At that moment, there was a big surge from all the sides with hot water." My husband goes, "You see that?" He says, "This mikveh is connected to an electric source. So there's constantly hot water coming in to re-warm the water." He says, "I am connected to my Mishaleach. I'm connected to the Rebbe. I'm never off the gas. I'm always with him. No matter how secular my community is, I'm connected to the source. And when you're connected to the source, you can never cool off." So this is really how we live. If we're living in Crown Heights, if we're living anywhere around the world, we got to be constantly plugged into the source every day, whether it's saying a little bit of chitas, whether it's watching a class. Today you're on your phone. There's hundreds of classes you could connect into, you could plug in. And that is constantly that fire that keeps warming you up so that when you are in that struggling place, there's always the piece of the mattress that you could look for. In general in life, Sarah, it's always about how you see the world. The glass half empty, the glass half full. Align yourself with positivity. Align yourself with friends that are positive, learning parts of Chassidus.
Right, but it's not just learning, and that's what I'm hearing from you. It's not just learning for the sake of learning, it's learning for the sake of applying. It's learning for the sake of it reminds me of this joke of this kid who had one line in the school play. And there was supposed to be the sound of a blast, and he was supposed to say, "Hark, I hear the cannon roar." And it comes the day of the play, and there's the blast, and he goes, "Hey, what was that?" In other words, he totally hit the whole point was when you hear that, then you say that. And I'll be like, "Hey, what's this about?" So it's almost like you're saying, when you learn something and then something happens, you're not supposed to be like, "Oh, what is it?" That's when you need to pull into everything that you learned. Before we wrap up, I'm curious if you want to leave us with something that you learned from Zalmy, that somebody learned from Zalmy, some like ending story that we could all learn when it comes to our own children and challenges?
Well, first of all, there's two things, Sarah. I really believe in a relationship. I'm also a marriage and intimacy coach. And the reason I got into that was really because in our own marriage and in all of our marriages today, we are very busy. We're multi-juggling: home, children, relationship, school, work. There's so many dynamics in our lives. And if we don't carve out time to work on your relationship, my husband and I are a real team. With all the learning, with all the discussions that I have, at the end of the day, my marriage is my focus. Because when there's a strong marriage, there's a strong home. The children are secure because mommy and tati are on the same page. Every single week, I literally can tell you every single week from when Zalmy was born, my husband and I would go out on Sunday for 2 hours every single Sunday. And whether it's an evening, whatever it is, you have to carve that out. You need to reconnect, because if you want the home to stand, the foundation's got to be strong, and the foundation is that marriage. But that's just a takeaway tool, which I tell every single couple, whether you have 10 kids.
So happy you said that, because the truth is we spoke a lot about inspiration, and I usually ask about practical, and I didn't. So I'm happy you brought that out. So you're saying, practically speaking, you want the strength to do all that, carve out that 2 hours with your husband.
Yeah. And it's not to talk about the kids. It's not it's about anything. Just go back, pretend you're dating. Just go for a coffee, go for a walk, go to the water. My husband knows the kind of things that I love. And that was the 2 hours every single Sunday. And being a busy Rav that he is, there was always either unveiling, or there was a meeting, or there was a funeral on Sundays. Nothing was booked until 12:30 Sunday afternoon, because that mornings was for the two of us. But I'll just give you a beautiful little story, an anecdote that actually, it was after Zalmy was nifter. So Zalmy touched a lot of people. We could have a recording on another crazy story. There's a whole family today, literally today in Chabad schools. The family came back because of my Zalmy. The boy is a shliach hamayinot. The children are in Chabad schools. The mother is from, she was married to a Greek guy. The children were all baptized. Today they're all from because of Zalmy. His neshama came down, accomplished a lot. But this one story really resonates with me. So it was right after Zalmy was nifter. One of the special needs organizations that was involved with Zalmy's life asked if they could make us a breakfast, because they wanted all their volunteers, there were about 40 or 50 of them, to share how Zalmy touched their life. A child that had a very low IQ, a child that had minimal abilities of communicating, very slow physical abilities, and yet he touched lives. So we came that morning, and everyone got up and spoke about Zalmy did this, and Zalmy was always happy, and Zalmy loved everyone, and Zalmy hugged everyone, and he picked up my day. Everyone had these great stories. There was one girl sitting in the back. She was very, very black, and she didn't want to have anything to say. And everyone said to her, "No, would you like to speak?" And she goes, "No, it's okay." As we're packing up to leave, she jumps out of her seat. She goes, "Okay, stop. I want to share something. Everyone, please sit down." Everyone sat down. And she stands up in front of the crowd and she says, "Look at me. I am black. And everyone who sees me, they only see black. But Zalmy never saw my color. He only saw me." That story, literally, that dialogue just blew us away. It stayed with me. It stays with me at every transition in my life. When I look at people and it's like, Zalmy only saw me. He never saw my black. I don't know if people that are more intelligent than Zalmy can walk around and say, yeah, that's how I lead my life. And you know what? And sorry, this is what it is. Zalmy passed away the day before his 15th birthday. You know, we know tzaddikim pass away and are born on the day of their birth, and the yahrzeit the same day. Zalmy was buried. His kavura was 2 hours before his birthday.
Wow.
So he really came down 15 years, taught us a whole lot, transformed our community, people, children, grandchildren. And, you know, we don't know. We don't know why the Eibusher sends us a test, why the Eibusher gives us a challenge. We just know the Eibishter makes no mistakes. The only thing I could say is that when you do go through a challenge, focus on filling up your tank with Memuna B'tachon, talk to the Rebbe a lot, write to the Rebbe a lot, and you'll get through, and you'll succeed, and you'll be an example and a role model for everyone around you. Even when you think you're failing, you will be teaching people so much.
Wow. Mrs. Plotkin, thank you so much. It's like such a powerful reminder, because a lot of times when it comes to parenting, we're looking for tips and tricks and, and how to get them to do this and how to have a calmer supper table, whatever. And it's so important to step back and remember the neshama of the child, not to get distracted by the mess and the challenges, but to focus on their qualities and their neshama. And that's what I'm hearing. And that's what we really all could use, like bringing out the beauty of their neshamas and celebrating that. And that for sure can impact them, even if it's not that little tip or whatever. It's that we're looking at them as neshamas through the lens of Torah and Chassidus. So thank you so much. This was really, really impactful to me. And thank you so much for sharing personally. Thank you everyone for listening to another episode of the Optimizing Mother podcast. Subscribe and tell your friends about this podcast. Thank you and have a good day.
Sarah.